Welcome to Life Stories, where we share heartwarming tales that inspire and touch the soul. Today, we bring you the incredible journey of James Carter, a small-town firefighter whose life took a dramatic turn when he rescued 5 sisters from a devastating fire. What started as a heroic act turned into a lifelong commitment, as James became the father they never expected but desperately needed. Through trials, love, and perseverance, this story shows how family can be forged through compassion and resilience. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to join us for today's unforgettable story. It was a quiet evening in Maple Ridge, Colorado, a picturesque town nestled among rolling hills and tall pines. James Carter sat alone in the fire station, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee as he stared out the window. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the small town, where life moved at a pace that seemed untouched by the chaos of the outside world. For James, this peacefulness was both a blessing and a curse. As the only full-time firefighter in Maple Ridge, he carried the weight of the town's safety on his shoulders. It was a role he cherished, though it often left him feeling isolated. At 42, James had spent years dedicating himself to the job, but his personal life had grown starkly empty. No family awaited him at home, only the quiet hum of an old fridge and a well-worn armchair by the fireplace. That night, as the sky deepened into shades of orange and crimson, the emergency alarm shattered the calm. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. Frantic and urgent, apartment fire on Pinecrest Avenue. Multiple residents trapped. All units respond immediately. James felt his heart pound as he sprang into action, grabbing his gear and jumping into the fire truck alongside his colleague, Tom Walker. The truck roared to life, its sirens slicing through the night. As they raced toward the scene, James's mind raced too. Fires in Maple Ridge were rare, and this sounded like one of the worst the town had ever faced. When they arrived, chaos had taken over. The apartment building was engulfed in flames, its wooden structure groaning under the heat. Smoke billowed into the sky, carrying with it the acrid smell of burning timber. Residents scrambled out of the building, their faces pale with fear. James scanned the crowd, quickly assessing the situation. He shouted orders to Tom and the other volunteers who had arrived, their movements a well-practiced rhythm honed over years of drills. "Everyone out of the building, move to safety," James bellowed, his voice cutting through the cacophony. As they began their rescue efforts, a piercing cry rose above the noise. James turned, his eyes locking on the upper floor of the building. A small figure stood at a window, waving desperately. The glow of the fire illuminated 5 children huddled together in the corner of a room, their faces streaked with tears. Without hesitation, James charged into the building, his protective gear shielding him from the searing heat. The old wooden stairs creaked under his boots as he ascended, smoke thickening with every step. His breathing grew labored, but he pushed forward, driven by the sound of the children's cries. When he reached the second floor, the sight of the 5 girls stopped him in his tracks. They were terrified, clinging to each other as the flames drew closer. The oldest, who couldn't have been more than 10, looked at him with wide, pleading eyes. "Help us, please," she cried. James's voice was firm but kind. "I'm going to get you out of here. Stay close to me." He picked up the 2 youngest girls, their small bodies trembling in his arms, and motioned for the older 3 to follow. Together, they navigated the crumbling staircase, the heat intensifying with every step. Just as they reached the bottom floor, a deafening explosion rocked the building. James turned to shield the children as debris rained down, blocking their path to the main exit. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. His eyes darted around, searching for another way out. At the end of the smoke-filled hallway, he spotted a window. "Quick!" To the window, he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He rushed over, using all his strength to break the glass with his axe. Shards of glass cut into his hands. But he barely noticed the pain. One by one, he lifted the girls through the window, their sobs echoing in his ears. As the last child scrambled to safety, James turned to see the flames consuming the room behind him. With a final surge of effort, he climbed through the window and collapsed on the grass outside. The girls were safe, but their cries didn't stop. James followed their gazes and felt his heart sink. The building was collapsing, and the girls' parents were nowhere to be seen. Tom approached James, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We did everything we could, James," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "But their parents, they didn't make it." James looked at the 5 girls, huddled together in shock and grief. His hands trembled as he realized the magnitude of what had just happened. These children had lost everything in a single night. As the fire died down and the morning sun began to rise, James sat on the steps of the fire station, his heart weighed down by guilt and a growing sense of responsibility. He knew what the orphanage truck would mean for these girls: a life of separation, uncertainty, and pain. And in that moment, James made a decision that would change all their lives forever. "I won't let them go," he whispered to himself. "They've lost too much already. They need a family. And if no one else will step up, I will." The weight of his choice settled on him. But for the first time in years, James felt something stir in his heart, a purpose beyond his work. A calling to give these girls the love and security they desperately needed. The morning air was heavy with the smell of smoke, a grim reminder of the fire that had consumed the apartment building the night before. James Carter stood at the fire station, watching as the orphanage truck rolled into town. His heart clenched. Inside, Margaret Hayes, the head of the orphanage, was preparing to take the 5 girls to the city, a place far from everything they had ever known. James had spent the night agonizing over his decision. His rational side told him he was stepping into uncharted territory. He was a firefighter, not a father. He knew little about raising children, let alone 5 grieving sisters. But the memory of their terrified faces and their cries for their parents haunted him. How could he let them face another loss? Margaret stepped out of the truck, her demeanor as composed as always. She was an experienced caretaker, known for her no-nonsense approach. As she walked toward James, she gave him a sympathetic but firm look. "James," she began, "I know this is difficult, but these girls need professional care. The orphanage is equipped to handle their needs." James shook his head, his expression resolute. "They need more than just care, Margaret. They need love. They need each other. I can't let them be separated." Margaret raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "You're a firefighter, James. Your job is dangerous. And you don't have any experience raising children. Do you even understand what you're taking on?" "I do," James replied, his voice steady. "I know this won't be easy, but they've lost everything. If I don't step in, who will?" Margaret hesitated, studying him closely. "This isn't a decision to take lightly. These girls will need stability, attention, and patience, qualities that are difficult to provide with your demanding job." "I'll learn," James insisted. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this work." Margaret sighed deeply, her expression softening. She turned to look at the girls, who were standing a few feet away, clutching each other tightly. The oldest, Emma, stepped forward, her small frame trembling but her voice steady. "Please," she said, looking up at James, "don't let us be separated." That single plea was enough to convince Margaret to relent. She nodded slowly, though her face still showed concern. "All right, James. But understand this: if things don't work out, I'll have to step in. I'll check in regularly. And the moment I see the girls aren't being properly cared for, they'll come with me." "Understood," James said. Relief washed over him, but it was quickly replaced by the daunting reality of what lay ahead. That afternoon, James brought the girls to his modest home on the outskirts of Maple Ridge. As they stepped inside, The girls clung together, their eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. The house, a simple wooden structure with minimal furnishings, was far from what anyone would consider a home for children. James knelt down to their level, his voice gentle. "This is your home now. I promise I'll do my best to take care of you." Emma, the eldest, nodded hesitantly. "You won't leave us, will you?" James placed a hand on her shoulder, his heart aching. "Never. We're in this together." The first night was quiet but heavy with unspoken fears. The younger girls, Lily and Abby, cried themselves to sleep, while Emma stayed awake, watching over them like a protective guardian. James, sitting in his chair by the fireplace, felt the full weight of his decision. The girls needed more than just a roof over their heads, they needed healing, comfort, and love. And James, for all his bravery, wasn't sure he was capable of giving them what they deserved. But as the hours passed, one thought remained constant in his mind: if not me, then who? The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains of James Carter's small house, casting a warm glow on the quiet living room. It was the girls' first morning in their new home, and James had woken up early, determined to make a good impression. He was in the kitchen, fumbling with a frying pan, determined to cook breakfast for his new family. The task was proving more difficult than he'd imagined. The eggs stuck to the pan, the toast burned, and the coffee was bitter enough to make him wince. James sighed, glancing at the clock. The girls would be waking up soon, and he didn't want them to think he couldn't manage even a simple meal. As he worked, the sound of small footsteps reached his ears. Turning, he saw Emma, the eldest, standing in the doorway. She was dressed and ready, her expression a mixture of caution and quiet determination. "Good morning," James said, attempting a cheerful tone. "I'm making breakfast." Emma's eyes darted to the pan and the slightly smoky air. "Do you need help?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. James hesitated, then nodded. "I think I might." Emma stepped forward, rolling up her sleeves like a seasoned professional. Her movements were careful but assured as she cracked eggs into a bowl and whisked them. Watching her, James felt a pang of guilt. This girl, barely 10 years old, was already carrying so much responsibility. "Do you cook often?" he asked gently. Emma nodded without looking up. "I used to help Mom. She said everyone should know how to cook. Just in case." Her voice faltered slightly, but she kept working. James swallowed hard, his chest tightening at the mention of their mother. He wanted to say something comforting, but the words didn't come. Instead, he focused on helping her, handing her ingredients and following her lead. Within minutes, the kitchen was filled with the warm, inviting smell of scrambled eggs and toast. The other girls wandered in one by one, drawn by the aroma. Abby, the second youngest, hesitated at the doorway, clutching a worn teddy bear. James smiled and waved her in. "Come on. Breakfast is ready," he said. The girls sat at the table, their movements tentative. The room was quiet as they ate, but the tension slowly began to lift. Lily, the youngest, giggled softly when Abby spilled a little orange juice on her plate. James seized the moment to lighten the mood. "Well, that's one way to flavor your eggs," he joked, earning a few small smiles. As they finished breakfast, James felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The rest of the day, however, proved more challenging. With 5 young girls under one roof, conflicts were inevitable. By mid-afternoon, James found himself stepping into his first sibling dispute. Grace, the third sister, was clutching a doll tightly while Hannah, the second eldest, glared at her. "That's mine," Hannah shouted. "You didn't even ask to play with it." Grace shook her head, her lower lip trembling. "I just wanted to hold it. You never let me touch your things." "Enough," James said, his voice firm but not harsh. The girls froze. their wide eyes fixed on him. James knelt down to their level, trying to soften his tone. "We're all in this together now. If you're upset, talk it out. But no shouting. Okay?" Hannah crossed her arms but nodded. While Grace muttered a quiet sorry, James exhaled, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Parenting, he realized, was far more complicated than he'd anticipated. That night, as the house finally grew quiet, James sat in his chair by the fire, reflecting on the day. He knew he had a long road ahead, one filled with moments of doubt and difficulty. But as he thought of the girls' hesitant smiles at breakfast and their willingness to listen during the argument, he felt a small flicker of optimism. "They need me," he whispered to himself. "And I need them too." The days turned into weeks, and James began to adapt to his new life as a caretaker for the 5 sisters. Each morning brought its own challenges, but also small victories. The girls were slowly adjusting to their new home, though their grief and fear often surfaced in unexpected ways. One particularly chilly morning, James was startled awake by a loud cry. He rushed out of his bedroom, his heart racing, and found Lily sitting in the middle of the living room floor, clutching her blanket and sobbing. Emma knelt beside her, trying to comfort her younger sister. But Lily's cries only grew louder. "What happened?" James asked, his voice filled with concern. Emma looked up, her eyes red. "She had a nightmare. She dreams about the fire almost every night." James's chest tightened. He knelt beside Lily, his voice soft and steady. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here. Nothing's going to hurt you." Lily looked up at him, her tear-streaked face filled with fear. "I dreamed you were gone, too," she whispered. The weight of her words hit James like a blow. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I'm not going anywhere, Lily. I promise. You're safe now." As the morning light crept into the room, Lily's cries subsided. James stayed with her until she fell back asleep, her small hand gripping his shirt tightly. He carried her back to bed, his resolve to protect these girls stronger than ever. Later that day, James faced another test of his patience. The older girls, particularly Hannah and Grace, often clashed over trivial things. That afternoon, it was about who got to sit by the window during lunch. Their bickering quickly escalated into raised voices, and James had to step in. "Girls, stop," he said firmly, his voice cutting through their argument. "This isn't how we solve problems." "But she always gets her way," Grace snapped, crossing her arms. "That's not true," Hannah shot back, her cheeks flushed with frustration. James took a deep breath, trying to suppress his own irritation. "Listen to me. We're a family now, and families need to work together. If there's a problem, we talk about it calmly. No more yelling. Okay?" The girls exchanged stubborn glances but eventually nodded. James encouraged them to take turns sitting by the window, hoping to teach them the importance of compromise. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Despite the challenges, there were moments that gave James hope. One evening, as he was cleaning up after dinner, he overheard the girls giggling in the living room. Peeking in, he saw them huddled together on the couch, playing a game they'd made up. The sight filled him with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. These moments reminded him why he had made this choice. It wasn't just about providing a roof over their heads, it was about creating a home, a place where they could feel safe, loved, and whole again. That night, as James lay in bed, he thought about how much his life had changed in such a short time. The once quiet firefighter who spent his days alone now found himself surrounded by laughter, tears, and the chaos of 5 young lives. It was exhausting, yes, but it was also fulfilling in ways he hadn't expected. "I may not be perfect," he whispered to the darkness, "but I'll do everything I can for them. They deserve nothing less." Life in the Carter household gradually found its rhythm, though it was far from easy. James faced challenges every day. But he also discovered the depth of his own resilience and the resilience of the girls. Their bond grew stronger with each shared moment. Each trial overcome. One weekend, James decided to take the girls on a trip to the local park. It was a bright, crisp morning, and he hoped the fresh air and open space would lift their spirits. He packed a picnic basket with sandwiches and snacks, determined to create a day of joy for his little family. As they arrived at the park, the younger girls raced ahead, their laughter ringing out in the cool air. Emma stayed close to James, her thoughtful nature always keeping her slightly apart from the carefree energy of her sisters. "Are you okay, Emma?" James asked as they strolled along the path. Emma shrugged, her gaze fixed on the ground. I keep thinking about Mom and Dad. They would have loved this park." James nodded, his heart aching for her. "It's okay to miss them, Emma. They'll always be a part of you, no matter what." Emma looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "Thank you for taking care of us. I know it's not easy." James smiled, ruffling her hair. "You girls are teaching me more than I could ever teach you. We're in this together. Remember?" The day unfolded with moments of laughter and lightness. The girls played tag, climbed trees, and shared stories while they ate lunch on a checkered blanket. For a little while, it felt like the weight of their loss had lifted, replaced by the simple joy of being together. But the peace didn't last long. That evening, back at home, James faced yet another test. While cleaning up after dinner, he overheard a heated argument coming from the girls' bedroom. Rushing in, he found Hannah and Grace once again at odds, this time over a book. "It's mine," Grace shouted, clutching the book to her chest. "You never even read it," Hannah retorted, her voice sharp. "Enough." James's voice cut through the chaos. The girls froze, their wide eyes fixed on him. Taking a deep breath, he knelt to their level. "Why are we fighting over a book? There's enough hurt in the world without us adding to it here at home." Hannah and Grace looked at each other, their anger softening into guilt. "Sorry," Grace mumbled, offering the book to her sister. "Me too," Hannah said, her tone quieter. "We can share it." James smiled, feeling a flicker of pride. "That's better. Remember, we're a team. Let's act like it." Later that night, as the girls slept, James sat by the fire, reflecting on the day. The park had been a reminder of how far they'd come, but the argument showed him how much work lay ahead. Parenting wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence, love, and being there, even when it felt impossible. Looking into the crackling flames, James whispered, "We'll get through this. Together." The weeks turned into months, and the once chaotic household began to settle into a fragile harmony. James had become more adept at managing the everyday needs of 5 young girls. Though the challenges were never-ending, each child had her own unique personality, and James learned to adapt to their individual quirks and struggles. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, James called the girls into the living room. He had spent the past week preparing a surprise, something he hoped would bring a sense of home to their lives. "All right, everyone," he said, clapping his hands together. "I've got something to show you." The girls exchanged curious glances as James led them outside. In the backyard, illuminated by string lights, stood a treehouse handcrafted by James and his neighbor, Mr. Jenkins. It wasn't perfect, but it was sturdy, with a wooden ladder, small windows, and a space for the girls to call their own. "Is this for us?" Grace asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. James nodded, his heart swelling at their reactions. "It's all yours. A place where you can play, read, or just escape for a while." Lily squealed with excitement, racing toward the ladder. The others followed, their faces lighting up with joy. Watching them explore the treehouse, James felt a rare moment of peace. For the first time, he saw the weight of their grief lift. replaced by genuine happiness. As the girls played, Emma climbed down and stood beside James. "You built this?" she asked, her voice tinged with awe. "I had some help," James admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But yeah, I wanted you girls to have something special." Emma's eyes glistened as she looked up at him. "It's perfect. Thank you." In that moment, James realized just how far they had come. The once shy and grieving sisters were beginning to laugh again, to hope again. He wasn't just providing a roof over their heads, he was helping them rebuild their lives. But the journey was far from over. The following week, James received a phone call from Lily's teacher, Mrs. Donovan. Concerned, she explained that Lily had been struggling in class, often zoning out and refusing to participate in group activities. "It's normal for children who've experienced trauma," Mrs. Donovan said gently. "But I thought you should know." That evening, James sat with Lily on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around them. "Mrs. Donovan called me today," he began carefully. "She said you've been having a tough time in school. Want to talk about it?" Lily shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "I don't like it there. Everyone looks at me like I'm different." James's heart ached for her. He took her small hand in his. "You've been through a lot, Lily. It's okay to feel different. But you're also brave and smart. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." Lily looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "I just want things to be normal again." James pulled her into a gentle hug. "We'll get there, sweetheart. One step at a time." As the days passed, James worked harder to support Lily, attending parent-teacher meetings and helping her with schoolwork in the evenings. Slowly but surely, she began to open up, her laughter returning little by little. Through every triumph and every setback, James reminded himself of one thing: love and patience were the foundation of a family. And though they weren't bound by blood, the bond he shared with these girls was stronger than anything he could have imagined. Together, they were building a life full of resilience, hope, and unwavering love. As the years passed, the Carter household transformed into a place filled with love, laughter, and resilience. James watched with pride as the girls grew into strong, compassionate young women, each pursuing her dreams while cherishing the bond they had built together. What began as a spontaneous act of kindness had turned into a life-changing journey that redefined the meaning of family. James often reflected on how much the girls had taught him about courage, forgiveness, and the power of unconditional love. They had healed not only their own hearts but his as well. Together, they proved that family isn't defined by blood but by the connections we nurture and the sacrifices we make for one another. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Your support inspires us to share stories that touch the soul. See you in the next video.